a win against Rutgers. Now, I did see a good portion of the game, and they simply outclassed Rutgers. That was not much of a football game, just too much athletic ability, too much speed, and Rutgers got into a shooting match in which they were ill-equipped for. When Ethan Kalkimanis and a Greg Schiano offense is forced to throw 47 passes, that is certainly not their game.
Yeah, so, and part of this whole USC irrelevance theme and reality, it was magnified by, very, very late start on Friday, starting around 11:10 in the East. And of course, the Dodger-Yankee World Series game, was in extra innings when the USC game started, and Freddie Freeman hit the grand slam home run, and people were at the Coliseum looking at their phones, just as people were at the Laker game looking at their phones, so USC got completely overshadowed by that. And then, of course, there's the full Saturday of college football, and USC wasn't part of that. So, just in terms of the news cycle, if there was any kind of bump or buzz to be gained from this Rutgers win, well, the Friday night start and the World Series, it just drowned out USC in the news cycle. So, USC is not something that people are talking about. And of course, at Trojans Wire, I got some readers from, burying Lincoln Riley after the Minnesota and then more recently the Maryland game, because, the pitchforks were out after those losses. Beating a bad Rutgers team, that's not going to move the needle at all. So, it was just the ultimate weekend for just zero, hot button discussion about USC, and all of these confluences of events just kind of magnify that. So, as we now try and discuss the state of USC, as we try and look at the condition of this football team and this program, two really big themes overall coming out of the Rutgers game. And one is that, USC was finally able to dominate a bad team. The offensive line played great. Miller Moss played great. Woody Marks played great. So, the offensive line plays at a high level, at least relative to the opponent. And it all comes together for the offense, right? And that just makes sense. It's very much in concert with everything we talked about in the offseason and into the early weeks of the regular season. If the offensive line does a great job, it all comes together. Miller Moss plays great. People were burying Miller Moss, and to be sure, he's made some critical mistakes late against Penn State, the third quarter interception against Maryland. To be sure, he has made some pivotal mistakes that have hurt USC at times. But the idea that he should be replaced by Jaden Mayaba, the idea that he's not a good quarterback, the Rutgers game showed if the offensive line does its job in front of him, it all comes together. He's a very good quarterback if he gets the help. And that was my theme the whole offseason, right? Miller Moss is not Caleb Williams. He can't do it himself. He's not Superman. He's not going to wear a cape. He needs the help from his 10 teammates, especially those 5 big uglies up front. When he gets that help, he's really good. When he doesn't get that help, he's not able to transcend that. So that analysis has held up entirely this season. It's the offensive line which has held the program back. And so that leads us to the other really big point about USC going into November, going into this game at Washington in Seattle. Can this USC offensive line do against Washington, and then later in November against Nebraska, and then against Notre Dame? Can it do against half decent or really good teams that it's going to play in November? Can it do what it did against Rutgers? Can it do that against better opposition? Because if it can't, then we're just going to remember this season as the only teams USC could hammer were Utah State and Rutgers, and you could say maybe Wisconsin for the second half. But any half decent, moderately good team USC couldn't beat. So that is really what's at stake in November. Can the offensive line specifically and the team in general play at a reasonably high level, play a reasonably complete game against a moderately good, if not really good, team? I would place Washington and Nebraska in that moderately good, average maybe slightly above average, but like basically middle tier, right? Washington, Nebraska, middle tier, Notre Dame, top tier. Can USC play well against middle tier or upper tier teams? Because Rutgers is not middle tier. Rutgers is bad. Rutgers lost at home to UCLA. Like that was the flashing warning sign heading into USC Rutgers. And it was reinforced by what we saw on the field. It's very surprising that Rutgers has fallen off a cliff the way it has, because it actually started the season okay, got a road win at Virginia Tech, and it just went very south very quickly. You know, the blowout loss to Wisconsin, I didn't see that one coming because Wisconsin had not shown a very high ceiling. So like that was also a flashing red light as well. But anyway, can USC now, you know, can USC, if USC can beat Washington by 22, if USC can beat Nebraska by 22, not just Rutgers by 22, okay, like maybe we have something, and maybe it's that dynamic where, you know, Happy's learning how to putt, and this team is beginning to really figure it out. It's beginning to truly coalesce, and you walk into the bowl game in the offseason with real world momentum, and you get a better 2025 recruiting class, and maybe you get some really good transfer portal pickups, and you might have something for next year. But we need to see that first. We need to see USC go into Husky Stadium and deliver the goods. And, you know, we were clamoring for, you know, obviously we'd love a complete 60-minute game, but let's at least get 45 good minutes. And we got that against Rutgers, all right? But now can you do at least 45 good minutes in Husky Stadium against Matt Rule in Nebraska, who almost upset Ohio State in the horseshoe? And then can you do it against Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame on Thanksgiving weekend? So that's what's at stake in November. And the one last thing is that if you know UCLA is technically a road game because it's at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, but of course it's basically a neutral site game. It's obviously not a game where USC is walking into a road environment. That's basically going to be a split stadium. So technically a road game, but for all intents and purposes, UCLA is a neutral site game. So Washington is really the last true road game on the schedule in 2024, you know, because Nebraska's at home, Notre Dame's at home. So if USC loses to Washington, the Trojans will walk away from 2024 with zero true road wins. Michigan, Maryland, Minnesota, Washington, 0 for 4, LSU neutral field. What an embarrassment that would be, and what a negative recruiting tool it would be for Dan Lanning and for Kyle Whittingham and for the other Western programs that compete against USC for upper tier talent. USC cannot have that noose around its neck in terms of negative recruiting. You got to get a true road win on the board in your final shot. So, you know, while USC is obviously not playing for conference championships, it's not playing for a New Year's Six, you know, all that's out the window, done, no hope, no chance. This game at Washington is very, very important for the reasons I've just stated. So if USC can, you know, go into Husky Stadium, win by 20, you can begin to make a case that, maybe this program is not in as bad a condition as we previously thought. And maybe you're seeing this team, you know, after getting kicked in the face multiple times and failing to finish games, maybe this team is finally finding the level of maturity that we all need to see. And we can go into 2025 thinking, you know what, we lost all these one-score games. We lost all these fourth-quarter games. If we improve the talent and depth on the roster, we can be right there. Not necessarily at the very top of the sport. That seems a little too ambitious right now, but we could be in like that second tier, right below the top tier in 2025. But again, we need to see this team really come together and do against Washington and do against Nebraska what we've just seen this team do against Rutgers. And if USC is, you know, there in the pig pen, you know, playing a sloppy, uneven game, and it's 19-17 in the final 2 minutes against Washington, against Nebraska, win or lose. You know, if these games are going down to the final few minutes and USC is just leaving the door open and playing well half the time, a 30-minute team, that's been the theme most of the season, then none of us are going to have real confidence about what 2025 is going to bring. It's up to USC to make that statement and really show, yeah, we're raising the bar and we are going to go into 2025 and we're going to fix this thing and get it right.